Welcome to this episode of the Catholic Money Show. I am thrilled for you to be joining us today in this special conversation. I have invited fellow podcaster Jamie Rathjen on to join about discussing the intersection of our cycles as women, our hormones, with our finances. So thank you, Jamie, for joining me for this very important discussion.
I am so excited to talk about our hormones, our cycle, and how that
It's
impacts the way we
something that
spend
I
money.
don't think many
So I'm so
people
glad to
give
be here.
thought to. I mean, in general, yes, our money, but so many other aspects of our life, our hormones are influencing. I know that you have done a lot of work with the Fiat Institute. Would you mind, just before we dive into the practicals around finances and our hormones, what is it that you do? How did you get started? And just let people get to know who you are a little bit.
Yeah. So fiat, for those who may not know what that word is, it's more than just the name of a car. But fiat is Mary's response to the angel Gabriel when he came to her and was a messenger of God and asked her to be the mother of Christ. He invited her into that. And she said, Fiat voluntas tua, which means let it be done to me according to your word. And so that is really the mantra and the anchor of all that I do, not only in my professional life, but also in my own personal life, in my marriage, and in my family life as a mother. And so, again, Fiat Institute was born from this need that women were not saying yes to our nature as women. We're not saying let it be. For the most part, we don't even know that we can, or we're too afraid to say yes, let it be. And when I say that, I mean sometimes it seems scary to say yes to our fertility, even managing our fertility, no matter what our family planning goals are, or saying yes to that baby, or even saying yes to what God's asking in our life. How we can, bear creativity and bear fruit even beyond the children we bear. So it's this training body that trains women to be hormone coaches, and it's where the hormone genius and the feminine genius intersect. So I train women to understand and utilize their feminine genius when coaching other women about their hormones and hormone health. But it's such a deep journey. It's more than just health discovery, but it's really about like womanhood discovery. And I'm just so excited. So I've trained over 60 women so far, and I launched 2 years ago, and I can just see it just getting bigger and growing.
I love it.
Even more because of the
And
need
you're
in our
right.
world.
I think that as women, there can be that fear, whenever we're asked to give that fiat in whatever capacity it is in our life, there oftentimes comes that hesitation, and having others accompany us in being able to generously step into that, into who exactly we are being called to be, is the greatest work, and so I thank you so much for what you do and just how important that it is. Now, the other thing that you kind of do in addition to the Fiat Institute, you're a fellow podcaster as well. And I'm going to guess that some people listening to the Catholic Money Show have also listened to the Hormone Genius. Yes, that's the name of the show. Okay. And would you mind sharing a little bit about what you discuss over there?
Yes. Yeah. So my co-host and I, Teresa Kenny, we started this podcast, again, the Hormone Genius podcast in 2020. And if you guys all remember the year of 2020, a lot of people were online. We were all trapped in our homes. So yes, it's really a show to empower women to be the genius of their hormones. And so when Teresa and I thought of that word, it wasn't because we are the hormone geniuses. It's really to empower women to become the genius of their hormones. So our discussions range from like the fertility cycle and what our cycle as a vital sign of health can tell us about the state of our health. And we dig into things like our gut health and our liver health and biohacking and cycle syncing, and plenty of interviews with women who've struggled with miscarriage, infertility, postpartum depression, all these aspects of, our hormone genius or womanhood that often we don't necessarily hear in our culture today. So we really dive deep. And again, we pride ourselves in a very like
Mhm.
evidence-based, scientific, but
Yeah, and I
entertaining
can attest to that.
experience
It's
for our
an
listeners.
episode, or a lot of them are episodes you could share with a friend or your mom or, a neighbor down the street that they might
Mhm.
not come to the table with the same faith, perhaps, but everything is steeped in evidence, and our
Right.
bodies. It's the science that you're talking about and just how God made us, but in terms that other people can understand. And I think it's
Mhm.
resonating with a lot of women. And so that does bring us around to the topic that we're going to tackle
Mhm.
today. And just, I love how, our hormones as women have really become something that have been top of mind for a lot of more younger women who are just tired of having our hormones hijacked
Mhm.
or steamrolled by the pill or this, that, or the other, and that we're starting to, as a society, really
Mhm.
unpack what it means to have our cycle and what fluctuations come with that. So, for someone listening that maybe is not familiar, with this topic, could you just give a very basic walkthrough of a monthly cycle and just the fluctuations that happen?
Mhm. Absolutely. And even before I say that, I also want to make one clarifying point. So with hormone coaches, we really address the health aspect, the vital sign of health. But some of you guys who are listening may be working with like a fertility care practitioner or a fem trained provider, and you may be charting
Hmm.
your biomarkers of your cycle. But our cycle and our hormones give us so much more information, which again is why I'm so excited to talk about our spending habits, because again, our hormones are
Hmm.
beyond just the fertility aspect. It influences so much about us. So yes, there are four main phases of the menstrual cycle. So there's the menstrual phase, the follicular phase, the ovulatory phase, and the luteal phase. And the menstrual phase, the first day of the cycle, is what marks the menstrual phase. And that's when our
Hmm.
menses begins. That's when our period starts. So we get our period because we did not get pregnant from the cycle before. And because we didn't get pregnant from the cycle before, the hormones that were amped up from that cycle to sustain a baby, because there's no baby, then our hormones plummet and then we bleed. We shed our uterine lining that would have held that baby and nourished that baby in the side of the uterus. And so normal periods between 4 to 7 days. And there's much more about the period, and go to Hormone Genius to learn more or work with a hormone coach to learn more about that.
Hmm.
Is your period normal? I mean, that's a whole other conversation. So typically 4 to 7 days of a normal healthy period. And then a number of days following, um, your your body is preparing to ovulate. So actually, even the beginning of your menses, the whole goal of your fertility cycle is
Hmm.
for ovulation. Ovulation is the main event. So you have your period, but meanwhile, there's a little egg that's getting ready to rupture from the ovary. And more specifically, it's getting ready to rupture from a cyst like structure called the follicle. So there are follicles in our ovary, which are again cyst like structures, and as the woman progresses through the cycle, the follicle that contains the egg is getting bigger and bigger. And this follicle, when it is getting bigger, it's producing the hormone called estrogen. And so the bigger the follicle, the more the estrogen. And for women who are charting their cycle or women who are not charting their cycle, you may recall times during the month where you notice when you go to the bathroom a very characteristic type of discharge that is like cervical fluid, cervical fluid. So we notice our red flow with our period, but there's also a white flow mid-cycle, and that marks increasing estrogen. This means we are going to ovulate soon. It means we're fertile, physically fertile. After ovulation, then the follicle that houses the egg shrivels up. It becomes something different called the corpus luteum, and now progesterone is the dominant hormone. You're no longer fertile. Again, you want to work with somebody if you're using this to avoid pregnancy, but there's a number of days that you wait after ovulation, and then if again you're using it for family planning. But the second half of the cycle is really an infertile time because the body is preparing to house a child, if conception took place. Even if it didn't, your body is
Hmm.
going through all these changes as though it did. And then soon enough, the body sees and senses, oh, there is no baby here. And then the whole cycle starts over. So that's high level, the 4 phases of the cycle. There's the menses, or the menstrual phase, the follicular phase, ovulation, the ovulatory phase, and then the luteal
Okay.
phase. That's the high
And,
level
as
overview.
we have these changes throughout the month, what I've always found fascinating just as a woman is how you're just never the same on any given day. You're always different and things are always happening and changing and shifting. Whereas that's different for men. They don't have that experience. And that is something that just so
Mhm.
many women have never known if they haven't been introduced to kind of just understanding these phases in our cycle. Um, would you say that it's just important and helpful for women to know this just on a general basis, not just for their fertility, but for how it impacts and affects the way that they work or mother or make decisions? How could you see that being important for women to just know at a base level?
Yeah, it's so important. To me, it shades and it colors my reality. It makes sense to things that maybe before I understood,
Mm,
I would self-shame perhaps, because there are certain times of the cycle you don't feel as
sure.
productive or as creative, or you trip over your words, or you're more moody. You know what I mean? I mean, of course, you nor I would ever experience any of those things, right, Amanda? But, it's like knowing that, being aware and not
Mhm.
identifying as that thing, thinking, "Oh, I'm just a moody person." When in reality, first off, we want to identify ourselves as daughters of Christ first. We don't want to identify with our struggle, but so many of us do. And when we do identify with our struggle, we forget that sometimes it's just
Yeah.
during certain times of the cycle we feel like that. And it almost like gives us permission to just be cool with it and be patient until, and kind of leverage the genius of the phase we're in, because we have different geniuses within
Mhm.
the phases that we're in, and then move on with life. And we're fine. So I think that helps a lot. It
'Kay.
colors our reality. And actually, Amanda, I want to read you something quick, and to your listeners. So I love this book a lot. It's called The Female Brain by, who is it by? Oh, Luann Brizendine. Brizendine, okay? The very
'Kay.
first couple lines I'm going to read to you, okay? So, more than 99% of male and female genetic coding is exactly the
Wow.
same, right? Right? As Catholics, we're like, okay, well, there's this perfect complementarity between man and woman, but 99% actually of male and female genetic coding is exactly the same. Out of the 30,000 genes in the human genome, the less than 1% variation between the sexes is small. But that small percentage influences every single cell in our bodies. 1% difference between men and women influences every cell in our bodies, from the nerves that register pleasure and pain to the neurons that transmit perception, thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So that they found that the female brain is so deeply affected by hormones that their influence can be said to create a woman's reality.
Wow.
I mean,
That's so
I just
cool.
think that's
And it kind of
incredible,
makes you, just the
right?
times that we're in, the kind of bizarre people they want to throw gender against the wall and just mix it up and do whatever they want. No matter how many hormones you could pump down a man, there's no possible way every cell in their body is going to be changed or rewritten by that. It can't be done. Or vice
100%.
versa.
Nope.
Um, and
Exactly.
so that's wow, that's
Exactly.
powerful.
Mhm.
Just how that small difference makes a world of
I
a
think it's so
difference in
awesome.
us. Now, do you, Jamie, like now that this is kind of the
Mhm.
reality in which you see life, do you find yourself during the month just using the information
Mhm.
of your cycle to make different decisions of, okay, I'm going to have to work on this big project. You know what? I'm not going to do it 2 days before my period starts. Or are you making decisions based with this information?
100% of the time. Now it's just become a habit. But when I began this process of
Mhm.
trying to, I call it biohacking your cycle, I would create a plan like on my phone. So I'm going to decide when I'm going to work out and what kind of hefty workout. Let's say I'm having a hard time getting motivated to go to the gym. Well, I know that I'm going to have less mental barriers to get to the gym around ovulation and right before. And the reason for it is because our body, when estrogen is high, it's kind of like drinking a bunch of coffee. you know, like I love that as an analogy. Like the more
Mhm.
coffee I drink, in theory, the more energized I am. The more estrogen in our body, the more energized we are. So I'm going to work with the flow of my
Mhm.
body when it comes to exerting a lot of energy. And I'm not going to self shame or whatever. If all I want to do later in the cycle is walk, I'm going to really try to focus on maybe the like lifting or, maybe running a little harder or whatever, pushing myself physically during that follicular ovulatory phase.
Mm.
Because when estrogen is high, testosterone is high, which also accounts for higher libido. And so muscle mass grows
Sure.
faster. We can build way more muscle and not get injured like we would after the case.
Mhm.
So things like that, and also definitely planning projects. We're more creative when we again are in our follicular phase. I call it the estrogen genius phase. Like the estrogen genius phase, we're more creative, we're more social, we're more energized. And so if I need to do creative work, because again, many of your listeners, I'm sure, are entrepreneurs, or they work during the day, or maybe they're at home and they homeschool or whatever, but we're going to have better outcomes when we specifically focus
Mm.
on the areas where we're a genius. Not to say
Sure.
that we can't do it at other phases of the cycle. So absolutely,
Okay, so if you're
Amanda,
going to plan
totally,
a
totally I
big
do.
dinner and invite a ton of friends, maybe just you're going to do it next month, why not pick in that follicular phase or around ovulation?
Yeah,
Just go with it and have a little more energy.
100%. Yes. Right, right. Or if you're gonna schedule an interview, you're like, you're chosen to interview a second time
Mm.
or whatever, and you get to choose the
Sure.
day. Again, don't let it psych you out if you're not in that phase. You'll be fine. But you really can leverage that energy, and really we just have like kind of this magnetic attraction about
Mm.
us that we can't explain and others can't explain. So that's the genius of like that fertile time. Physically, yes, we're fertile, but
So
even what we produce
fascinating.
is more fertile. Friendships can even be
That
more
is cool.
fertile.
And
It's really
for
cool.
the other times, I
um
guess, there's always
yeah,
God's
it's
grace and
awesome.
that can
And
make
then
up for whatever we're lacking. If it does happen to be like
right,
you have a huge
exactly.
interview and it's cycle day 1, God's grace will be enough. Uh,
Exactly. And I will say, Amanda, I'll say too that there are genius zones within each phase, and again, knowing those genius zones can help you leverage and lean on the thing that's going to come naturally. So, like during our period, the genius of our period is that we're more intuitive, we're more calm, reflective. So if you're thinking about a big life change, or if you're really praying and discerning, a big life question, or if you do have an interview on the first day of your period, you'll be able to lean on that intuitive sense, really allowing
mm,
maybe a little bit easier to allow the Holy Spirit to work through you because you're less distracted by your own energy and, your own brain. And then after ovulation, that genius would be, for the example of an interview, would be you're more detail oriented. So maybe you practice, you do role playing with your, spouse for some of the answer, and
mm,
you're going to be more likely to remember those details. As during estrogen, you're probably going to have like
mhm, mhm,
be successful flying off the cuff sort of thing. Like you probably will be a little more adaptable to kind of read body language. But there's so much benefit even in being that detail oriented person after ovulation. So again, it's kind of knowing that and leaning
mm.
into it,
I
to help
love that.
you with
And
whatever your
that,
goal
yeah,
is.
there's
It's pretty
not
cool.
just like one part of your cycle that's just dark and blah. They can come with their own strengths and their own geniuses.
Yeah.
Now, I want to spin this and talk about, personal
Mhm.
finances. Now that we kind of have this understanding of the hormonal fluctuations that happen in any given cycle, here on the Catholic Money Show, we're always talking about money, and this can be a fraught topic. It comes with a lot of emotions. It comes with a lot of sometimes discipline or fear, courage, and could we biohack some of our financial decisions or things that we need to go up against by just knowing the money decisions we're about to make and when we can kind of pair that up with our cycle or how our cycle might influence these things. So yeah, let's go ahead and turn into this conversation of our hormones meets money. And I have a few different just scenarios I'm going to toss out for when you might think, okay, you could leverage your cycle in this way if this is the situation you're about to go into. So a really common one for everybody, we encourage people to create a budget every single month with the money that God has entrusted to you. And budgeting can bring up a lot of different feelings and thoughts and opinions from people, but when could you see a good time in someone's cycle to do this? And when would there potentially be a rockier time, particularly if someone's married and they're coming into a budget meeting with a spouse?
Yeah. Truly, if we think about the genius zones of our menstrual phase, our menses is a great time. Even though you might think, I mean, depending on the woman's experience with her period, if she's experiencing pain, fatigue, there's heavy bleeding, then no, I wouldn't. I would not add any stress to that. I would just rest and relax. But if your period it comes and it goes and it is what it is, that's just a good time again to be intuitive and more calm, less reactive
Mm.
maybe to our husband if he disagrees with us, for instance, or again our wife, or I guess for men, they don't have a menses, so it would be again that woman to the man being less reactive to the woman. And our follicular phase, I would say, would be a good time if you're wanting to have
Mm.
like planning a vacation because you're going to be more creative. So again, thinking about budgeting, I'd say probably when it's a bit more quiet. That the thing that's interesting is that hormones vary every single day, and how it impacts individual women also can vary. So it really depends. Where are the pain points of your cycle? And don't plan a budgeting meeting around those pain points. Some pain points, it's a week before your period. Don't plan it then, plan it when you feel the best. And so if it were me, if someone asked me, when are you going to plan a budget? I would do it right after my period. Right after my period. I'm somewhat in the middle zone. I'm not super like creative hyper yet, because sometimes that ovulation, the estrogen genius phase can give you a lot of energy, but it
Mm.
can sometimes be anxious energy. So I'd say really
Okay.
right after your period, have a
Now
budget
that makes
meeting.
sense. Yeah, I could see that.
That's what I would
And
say.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'd say if it doesn't happen then, I would say post ovulation, because you're going to be thinking more about the details. And you'll probably, again, be more like right
Mhm.
after ovulation, be again more calm, because progesterone, which is the dominant
Yeah.
hormone after ovulation, has a sedating effect. It's not until like a week before your period when progesterone levels drop that you
Yeah.
start feeling
So
more,
like those
edgy.
72 hours leading up to maybe the start of your next period would be the edgiest for most women. Okay.
Yeah.
And if
Def-
budgeting tends to be
yes, totally.
bring friction in a marriage, maybe that would just be the days to skip or days of pain. Okay, that makes sense when it comes to budgeting. I'm curious, would you kind of apply the same decision making around making a major financial purchase, like purchasing a vehicle or making a home purchase or some other major financial decision? Would this be a time you'd want to take advantage of kind of that quieter, calmer time in your cycle?
I would say, especially if the purchase that you're thinking about making, let's say it's a car, if it's a trigger to you, or if there's some sense of emotion wrapped around the purchase, I think that when we make decisions around that period time, it's
Hmm.
less likely that we'll be emotionally reactive to it. So again, it's just in understanding the role of our hormones that I can deduce that. But it would make sense because estrogen is, again, very energizing. And again, there's a lot of, there can be a lot of anxiety which comes with that energy. And I'd say, again, like the second phase would be if there was a healthy ovulation and that's just it. If our hormones are balanced, this whole conversation is maybe looks a little different than if it wasn't. But then after ovulation, I would say would be the second
Mhm.
time that again you would make a bigger decision because you're more calm. Progesterone makes you a bit more calm,
Okay.
and
And
you're
what
not
if it
as
was a
like
decision
hyper.
that
So I would say in those two phases would be the
objectively it's
best.
good, but it's a little risky? And you know, is there ever an argument for, yeah, you should make this right around ovulation because it emboldens you and you just need to go for it?
Totally, totally. Yeah. So if you've been on the fence, estrogen, your estrogen genius is going to push you into
Mhm.
into the dream zone, if it's something you've been dreaming about or something that you need to just pull the trigger, step out and be bold, that would be when you would make that decision. But it's interesting. This is so crazy. So they did this study and there were, let's see, 443 females aged 18 to
Mhm.
50 who reported their spending like the previous 7 days. And so these researchers came in, asked them about their spending, and they just asked, like, over the last week, what was your spending like? And then they assessed where they were at in their cycle. And actually, they found that the more impulsive
Oh.
spending actually took place in the luteal phase,
Mm.
more specifically, like days before our period. And I believe the reason why, so it came with impulsive spending and anxiety about money, because when we're in that luteal phase after ovulation, I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
saying right after ovulation, I'm saying like maybe the week before your period. So the luteal phase is like about 2 weeks long. Um,
Mm.
During this phase, we have more cravings. We do. We want to feel better. And you know what I mean? Like, if you're gonna self-medicate with food,
So would
this
this
is
would
the
this be
time
like
that
all
you would do that.
the Target moms getting their Starbucks and
But
going around
but they
making impulse
yeah.
buys? It's probably like a week out from their period, and they're gonna regret all
Oh,
these
yeah,
purchases.
totally. Yes. Yes. Yes, exactly. And if it were up to me, if I were to guess, I would say, "Oh, that's all gonna happen during your estrogen genius, like the follicular phase. That's when you're gonna be making all these purchases." But actually,
Mhm.
again, they found that it was not then, but it was right before, again, the week before their period. And I think about that a lot. They've done a
Mhm.
lot of studies on our
Yep.
food cravings, and it is during that time, that we are hungrier. So I don't know about you, Amanda, but like if I'm driving around and I'm hungry, sometimes I'll just
Yeah.
stop in and get
Yes.
something, as opposed to maybe going home and eating, when I get home. So I think of it in that way,
Mhm.
if we're hungry or even just
Yep.
hungry, we might be more impulsive in blowing our budget and eating the thing. Kind of like also when we're pregnant, honestly. When I'm pregnant, I'm like,
That's a
I
wallet risk.
want what I want and I want it now. Like that kind of feeling.
So it
That's a
is
wallet
interesting because,
risk to be
studies have
sure.
shown that when we spend money,
Um,
we get a dopamine hit. So, if we're entering into a time where our hormones are starting to kind of lower, preparing for the next period, um, we're going to be looking for a comfort wherever we can get it. And so it doesn't surprise me that, yeah, maybe it's not when we're more impulsive or flush with energy from ovulation. It's when we're looking for something to feel good or right, and we want to feel happy in some way. And so spending money is one of the easiest and fastest ways to do that. Um, and that is not a great thing to do. It's not a great coping mechanism, but if we're aware of it, well, all of a sudden maybe we won't go to Target, we'll go to adoration or we'll go for a walk, or we can find a healthier coping mechanism that doesn't
right.
accidentally hurt
Yeah.
our financial
Mhm.
goals or financial reality as well. um, so another thing you mentioned earlier, just
Amen.
being detail oriented, if somebody is trying to save up for, a vacation or to pay off debt, um, and they need to have a little bit more discipline, if you will, and commitment. When would be a time in the cycle where you could see somebody just being able to tap into their
Mhm.
hormones to know, okay, this is going to be the best time to really just move that goal forward?
Yeah. I'd say right at the height of that progesterone. So if anybody has ridden a roller coaster, you know that there's a climb to the top and then there is a fall at the end, but then there's always like that high point. And so after ovulation, that's what your progesterone is doing. It's kind of climbing up to the top and then it's falling down. And so we can ride the wave truly of our progesterone. And so kind of that week after ovulation is a good time where that woman is calm and again very keyed in on details. And that's another thing too with planning that budget, making a spreadsheet, writing it down, crossing off the list. And
Mhm.
also I know that personalities also
Right.
vary. So hormones don't override our personality, but hormones turn up the volume. They turn up the volume. So if somebody's already very detail oriented, they're going to be more detail oriented. If someone's not very detail oriented after ovulation or just their personality in general,
Yeah, right.
they are going to be more detail oriented than their baseline. So, even people who are introverted, they're like, I'm not social and I'm not creative or I'm not whatever
Mhm.
during my
Mhm.
follicular phase. Well, you are more. It's a volume, it's a dial. Um, so yes, we're adding a little bit more noise
Okay.
to that kind of
And so
tendency
that would
of
help,
being more
just
detailed.
knowing that maybe, we teach people to look at their financial personality. Are they more of a saver or a spender? Do they tend more towards tuning out or geeking out? And just to know that this is the time in your cycle where you could there's strengths to all of those types of things. Not one is better than another, but this would be a time in your cycle where you could kind of lean into
Mhm.
those, whatever those strengths that you have are, use them to your advantage, and this would be the window to really to do that. I love that.
Mhm.
Um, so my husband actually thought
Yeah,
of this
exactly.
question
Yeah, yeah.
because it came up for us once. Um, and not everything, has a financial component, but a lot of things that we end up deciding to put into our budget, they have a financial component, and they also affect our hormones, or our cycle can have an impact on them. So, one time we had decided
Mhm.
that we were going to put new new clothes for me into the budget because I had been neglecting that. I'm a saver. I tend not to go into those types of purchases lightly. And he kind of has to shove me out the door and say, like, I've given you a bunch of money to go get some new clothes for this, that, or the other thing. Um, and I think I made a mistake. I went shopping right before my period, and I came home and I found nothing. And he was frustrated that I hadn't spent the money that we decided. Would there have been a better time in the cycle to go something like
Mhm.
clothes shopping?
Yeah. Oh, big time. So when we again think about the flow of our cycle, it's really in that time where you probably feel the most beautiful. And often the time we feel the most beautiful and we actually are. So they did this study where they compared the same woman before
Really?
ovulation and after ovulation, and truly our face changes ever so slightly. Yes. So when estrogen is high, our features are softer. Like our eyes are a little softer, our cheeks are a little softer, like more
Mm,
flush. And then after ovulation, they become kind of more squared. Which again, it's incredible. It's from I love the book, The Female Brain, but they give you these side by side images of before and after. So main point is you're probably going to want to shop when you feel really good about yourself, and typically we feel better during that estrogen genius phase. So I was even reading this article about how women were told to draw a picture of what they
hmm
would buy at the store on this little image, like this little stick figure on a piece of paper. Okay, and they had them do that every phase of their cycle, and then the phase of their cycle where they were high estrogen, about to ovulate, they were like tube tops and like little mini skirts sort of thing. you know, as compared to after ovulation, which was like a denim jumper and like a little like more modest.
that
And
is,
so it's just
it is so
interesting,
interesting.
you know, crazy, just crazy. So yeah, go shopping when you have money to
Yeah,
spend, do it when you're in your
right.
fertile phase, your estrogen genius phase. So that's about like a weekish after your period.
Okay.
Every
So
woman's
sometimes,
cycle is
yeah, it's
different, but just throwing
making the
that out
decision
there
to
is
set
that's
the
a good
money
time.
aside is one thing, but
A
then
week or like that.
when you go to spend it, you might have to be aware of what time in your cycle that is too, and just making sure that that lines up with an ideal time. All right. So one last question about this is just, we have a lot of
Yeah.
people that want to increase
Mhm.
their giving, increase their generosity. And it can bring a lot of fear to go ahead and commit to giving more to your parish, etc. Would there be a time that would be easier to maybe part with your money during your cycle than it would be another time?
Yeah. I'd say if we were to compare the first half of the cycle to the second half of the second half of the cycle, like I shared, especially that week before your period, you may be more impulsive, but it will come with anxiety. Again, this is from the study that they found of over 400 women. So I think it's really about we may be willing to spend the money. It's how we feel about spending the money. So a week before the
Mm,
period, we feel anxious about it and kind of like a buyer's remorse. Oh, should we have done that? And that makes sense because of our survival instinct. If we're carrying a child and we need to live in a safe environment with money to give us food and shelter and all these things,
yes.
it would make sense we would feel more nervous about not having that or having less of it. If we were to be carrying a child, let's just say. So it makes sense in terms of our biology. But during ovulation, again, biologically, we're not pregnant yet. And so it would be probably better and easier to spend that money during your estrogen genius phase. And it would be even better to have prayed and intuited and reflected upon what you could give during your period.
Mhm.
So it's like kind of asking the Lord, what can I give? What are you calling us to do? And then making kind of the final pulling the final
Mhm.
trigger during the estrogen genius
Okay.
phase,
I
which
love
again is
that.
called the
Yeah. I
follicular
mean, if
phase,
you're
and
going to be doing the
as it approaches
budgeting around
ovulation.
then as well, you could be thinking about the money that you want to give. And then before too much time creeps
Yeah.
by and you panic, make sure to
Hmm.
get it out the door and make that gift. Right.
Yes,
Sometimes,
exactly.
That can happen.
Exactly. Don't
You've
wait
set
too
a
long.
financial goal,
Don't wait too
and
long.
at one time in your cycle, it could have made perfect sense. But then if you let too much time go by, now all of a sudden you could feel completely differently about it, even though you and your spouse may have agreed it was the right thing to do. And I think that just this knowledge is helpful because it could prevent somebody
Right.
from panicking too much and not following through with something, or just and staying the course and just knowing that what I feel this way today, but we
Hmm.
decided together, we prayed about it, and I'm going to let a few days pass, and I'll probably feel differently in a week. And there's probably just some wisdom there in general, not just when
Yes,
it comes to our
exactly.
finances, but in general, if we're ever feeling um, anxious or depressed, there could be a lot of factors going into that, certainly stressed, but sometimes as women, it really is just give it a day or two and you might feel completely differently about it in a very good way. Like it could just resolve.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that you
Yep,
wanted to
exactly.
add or share around kind of how our faith or our finances and our hormones kind of intersect and how that might look out in our monthly cycle?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I just love analogies so
Mhm.
much. I think it breaks down complicated and complex things into easy to understand. Of course, and then the Lord, he used parables all the time so that, we could understand what he meant. So, in terms of anything else I'd like to add, I just want to bring in this little element. I think it'll help your listeners kind of pare this all down and help them remember. Okay, so we know we just talked about the cycle, right? That's how we began the episode. We talked about there are 4 phases. There's the menstrual phase, there's the follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and luteal phase. If you think about spending during our menstrual phase, we can relate that menstrual phase kind of like shopping at the dollar store. Like we're on a budget. So even the questions you're asking me, Amanda, like when's the best time to like set a budget, and be more reflective about your true needs. I always like to think, okay, your menses is like the dollar Tree or the Dollar General. You isn't that funny? Like, you
Yep.
get what you need. You don't need anything crazy. You're in, you're out. Cool, So that would be the best time. And you know what, Amanda? I don't remember where I learned this, but some gal I follow, and it might have been you guys, I don't remember, but like pick 1 week a month to just say you and your husband, you're not gonna spend anything. Like, you're gonna get your gas that weekend before, your groceries that weekend before, anything like birthday presents, that whole week, you don't spend a dime. And so during my period is when we don't spend any money. Because you better believe I'm the girl, like, doing all these little
Okay.
shopping trips. So the menstrual phase, Dollar Tree. Think about that. And then follicular phase is like the farmer's market. We want to look good. We want to feel good. We want to be healthy. And we might be spending a little bit more on things. The ovulatory phase is when we want to go to a boutique. There is no organization in a boutique. Not at all. It's right. It's like all plopped together. It smells good. It looks good. It feels good. It's like inspiring all of your senses, and you want to shop around and enjoy this experience, right? And I wonder if when you went shopping during your luteal phase, if you went to a boutique, because if you had gone to a department store where there are clear sections, there are clear sizes, there are clear like sports stuff, dresses, jeans, it's more organized and easier for the brain to comprehend. I can imagine shopping in the luteal phase, that being more productive. So luteal phase is the department store spending. So I like to think of it that way, and I wanted to make sure I brought that up, especially after you said you were so overwhelmed. I'm like, I bet she went to a
Yes. Well,
boutique
and
when she went
I tend
shopping
to get
during her
like
luteal phase.
fairly severe PMS too. So, my hormones aren't the best. And
Oh
so
yeah, girl.
I just needed to have
No
greater awareness
patience.
of
Yeah.
I didn't need to be shopping anywhere. No, I wasn't. But yeah, I just,
You were
it
not
seemed like it
feeling
was
your
an
best,
efficient
girl.
move because that day was free. Not my best idea. I love that you brought up the
Right.
farmer's market, as in
Right,
the
right.
follicular phase, just wanting to be healthier and just feeling good. I mean, doesn't everybody feel better going to the farmer's market than they do the Dollar General? And
Yeah.
then the fancy boutique. I love that.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
the organized department store where you're just going to go in and go to the different organized sections and just make it happen. I love that. I love that analogy. Yes, I love that.
Right, exactly.
Well,
Even if you're
thank
shopping
you
for your
so much
family.
for having
Yeah,
this
yeah.
conversation with me. I know that there are listeners that would love to learn more from you and follow up with you. What is the easiest way that they can do that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can find me in 2 different places. You can find me at, Fiat Institute, so Instagram at Fiat Institute, and then also at Hormone Genius. You can also visit our website, hormonegenius.com or fiatinstitute.com. I'd say if you're wanting to learn more about your hormones and you love podcasts, definitely follow us on, the Hormone Genius podcast. But if you're looking specifically for health help, like hormone health help, you can visit our directory where you can kind of look around and meet with some of the different hormone coaches for a consult. And that might be exactly, again, what you're looking for. So, anyway, yeah, visit me on Instagram and
Very
I'd love to
good. I will
connect. You
link
can
to
send
all
me
of
a
that in the
DM
show
too if you have
notes
any
for
specific
those who would like to
questions.
just have an easy link to click. Go ahead, go follow. Make sure that you are tuned in to the work that Jamie is doing. Thank you again for joining us on the Catholic Money Show. I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. Until next time, bye for now.